This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. It's a cold Monday morning. I'm Evan Jansen. This show is live, broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube right now, where the whole show is always available on demand on our YouTube channel today. We look at the latest developments in the United States following more pronouncements on the FIFA scandal this weekend. We also look at the emotive issue of changing street names here in South Africa. Vandalism continues to rise and be a problem for all South African schools. And we close today with the AU summit and the challenges Kenya in particular is facing with insurgency. But first, let's get the day's news from Anindo Mel.
Good morning, I'm Anindo Mel. Let's have a look at the stories making headlines today. As football's world governing body continues to suffer more corruption allegations, Trinidad's Justice and Legal Affairs Minister has called on ex-FIFA Vice President Jack Warner to hand himself in. This morning, more reports have emerged saying Warner asked for $7 million from Egypt, suggesting it could help with Egypt's bid to host the 2010 World Cup. Meanwhile, bank statements suggest the 120 million rand payment from South Africa was spent by the former head of football in the Caribbean. In other developments, claims have emerged that Morocco actually won the bid to host the 2010 Soccer World Cup. Calm has been restored in Soweto, south of Johannesburg. Last night, chaos erupted when Dube hostel dwellers went on the rampage and looted a local restaurant and bottle store. Residents were angry over Eskom's decision of the disconnection to power to their area. Police say the hostel dwellers were informed about the planned load shedding. Although Eskom hasn't been load shedding in the past few days, certain parts of Soweto have been experiencing power problems. This is something the power utility is blaming on illegal connections. Lawyers for the Marikana miners will seek the immediate release of the report on the August 2012 violence today. The urgent application in the High Court in Pretoria comes after they wrote to President Jacob Zuma 2 weeks ago, warning him to release the report within 2 days. President Zuma insists he can only release it after studying it carefully. The president has said in Parliament that he would release the report before the end of this month. The trend by some African leaders to prolong their stay in power will come under discussion during the AU summit. This as South Africa prepares to host African leaders for the African Union's Heads of State and Government Summit in Sandton today. The summit is also set to focus on women empowerment. There will also be emphasis on the need to fast-track intracontinental trade and investment. Yesterday, the African Union Permanent Representative Committee got underway in Pretoria.
We examine ways and means in which we can accelerate development and address the many challenges that face us, including eradication of poverty.
In Burundi, political parties will meet today to discuss a new date for the presidential elections. This after the government and the country's electoral commission agreed to postpone the elections. President Pierre Nkurunziza says his bid for a third term would not be part of the meeting, as the matter was discussed at last week's East Africa community meeting. His announcement that he will seek a third term has led to violent demonstrations in the capital, Bujumbura. And this weekend saw Switzerland's Stanislas Wawrinka defy the odds to win the French Tennis Open in Paris. Wawrinka took the title with a 4-6, 6-4, 6-3, 6-4 victory over world number 1 Novak Djokovic of Serbia. The ace seed, who handed Djokovic his third defeat in the 3 French finals, now has 2 Grand Slam titles to his name after clinching the Australian Open last year. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Anina. As the identities of the 2 high-ranking South African officials implicated in the ever-growing FIFA corruption scandal remain a mystery. The South African Football Association says it's now considering legal action over allegations of bribery linked to the 2010 World Cup. In a separate development, new claims have emerged that Morocco actually won the bid to host the 2010 World Cup, even though South Africa was announced the winner. How that is tested, nobody really knows. But to get the very latest, now our US correspondent, Sherwin Bryce Pease, joins us on Skype from New York, very early in the morning there. Good morning to you, Sherwin. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Eben. Happy to be with you.
Now, Sherwin, has there been any reaction in the US to the statements made by the Sports Ministry and subsequently SAFA here in South Africa this weekend?
We can refer specifically to those statements, but I think what we are seeing as the story develops, Eben, is that this is a global story. I mean, this is a huge story with reactive statements in South America, in the Caribbean, in Zurich, in the United Kingdom. Russia has also said something. So we're seeing statements from around the world, not only in South Africa. And the FBI and U.S. prosecutors have made it very clear that they will be responding through the courts and not sort of in a rebuttal format to every person or every individual organization that is making statements with regard to the original indictment that was released about 2 weeks ago. Look, the last major development we had here in the USA is, of course, the unsealing of Chuck Blazer's testimony last week and expressing that, in his view, he facilitated, the payment of bribes in relation to the hosting of the 1998 World Cup and the 2010 World Cup. What we have not had from the FBI have been these rebuttals to statements emanating from South Africa and elsewhere. And given the nature of the story, Evan, the global dynamics, as I mentioned, that are at play here, we are hearing that the head of FIFA's Audit and Compliance Committee says if evidence of corruption and vote buying surfaces with regard to, for example, the awarding of the 2018 and 2022 World Cups in Russia and Qatar, then those awardings will be cancelled, throwing a whole new twist into the mix. And remember, those investigations are not being handled by the FBI. They are being handled by Swiss authorities. So we have a lot of moving parts in this story, and I think it will continue to be so until this matter, if it does end up in the courts.
Now, Sherwin, are we any closer than to finding out the names of co-conspirator number 15 and number 16, the supposed two high-ranking South African officials this indictment alleges paid bribes for votes?
Our powers of speculation and deduction aside, we probably are no closer. The FBI won't comment until they have to. We spoke with a legal expert here last week at Columbia Law School, and she was of the view that maybe law enforcement doesn't have enough evidence against them, or maybe the timing of that revelation is too soon. It could very well, as I've mentioned, end up in court. If we get into an open court situation where people have to be cross-examined, names will come up. Once we get to the discovery phase of this investigation, for example, when the prosecution, remember the prosecution, U.S. prosecution in this country has all the evidence before them. They haven't released all that evidence. But when you get to the discovery phase of a lawsuit, it is then obliged to hand over the evidence to the defense. Then we'll probably see more deals being made. Remember, there have been no arrest warrants issued for the South Africans for these alleged South African co-conspirators. So we have some idea who they might be, a process of elimination, but nothing more. But certainly nothing confirmed by the FBI or U.S. officials at this stage.
And what are the experts saying in terms of when all these unknowns will be made known? And when could we reasonably expect this matter to sort of hit the court?
Well, it depends on really who makes deals and pleads guilty before that. Remember, you have 7 arrests in Switzerland. Those 7 FIFA officials that were arrested will fight extradition to the United States. That's going to take some time. They say up to a year at least. Will Jack Warner, the man that really is at the center of a number of these accusations, the former Caribbean soccer boss, will he make a deal? The evidence of his misappropriation of the $10 million from the alleged $10 million from South Africa, let's be very clear about that, appears to be, more damning by the day. There's a BBC report out that is investigate where that money was used, and he paid off credit cards according to that report. And money was laundered through a supermarket chain in the Caribbean, and then they paid him out in local currency. So if the evidence against him continues to be too oppressive to sidestep, What information does he have that will help him make a deal with U.S. authorities, a deal that, could be acceptable to both sides? He released a video statement the other day talking about having documents, an avalanche of documents that could implicate various FIFA officials, including Sepp Blatter. To what extent will he be able to strike a deal? Does he have information that could be useful and implicate others? Then you have those extradition procedures in Switzerland. You also then possibly will have extradition procedures from the United States if we ever come to know who those co-conspirators are. Will the South African government, for example, comply with an extradition order issued by the United States? Law enforcement in South Africa and the United States tend to work very well together. Will this continue in this instance? What we do know at this point is that the U.S. Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, has repeatedly said that this is an ongoing investigation, and they're going to now speak through the court. So more people might be implicated. We are a long way from the end, Eben, a long way. You and I are going to have more conversations about this moving forward.
Before I let you go, Sherwin, is anything being said in the U.S. today or yesterday about new claims that Morocco actually won the 2010 World Cup to host the tournament?
Not specifically regarding who won or who lost the World Cup, but certainly Morocco, if you remember in that initial indictment, Morocco's name comes up a lot. In fact, Morocco, along with South Africa, are both accused of bribing Jack Warner, the Caribbean official that we've spoken about here today. So Morocco does come up. Who won, Eben? That's for the record books, I think. South Africa won the bid. They hosted the event. I think the speculation and the stories we're hearing about Morocco versus South Africa, I think that needs to play itself out when we have greater specificity from U.S. prosecutors and law enforcement here.
Sherwin, fantastic. Thank you for getting up at 3 a.m. for this contribution and giving us your unique views and also what is happening in the U.S. with regards to the FIFA crisis, FIFA scandal that seems to be widening and widening as the days and weeks continue. Now, I can tell you, South Africa's Football Association issued a detailed statement denying any wrongdoing, saying that the money sent on behalf of South Africa was meant to be used for its Caribbean Diaspora Legacy Program. But let's take a look at what you are saying about this on Twitter. Of course, at SABC Newsroom is where we interact. Usman Azam, is that right? Usman Azam says, TNT FIFA corruption scandal, Russia and Qatar may lose World Cups. Yes, that is what is on the cards. It's certainly no official pronouncement made yet. A fake Mac says, I'm betting that the first South African who's going to be arrested in the FIFA corruption scandal is Jerome Falk. I don't think he is a South African citizen, to be honest, fake Mac. Neil Collins says, if from the get-go we had told Warner pay back the money instead of deny everything, we might have had a chance. Talk about FIFA corruption, says Neil Collins. Andy Burrs says, have the media blamed Labour for the FIFA corruption here? It's only a matter of time before it figures that, okay, now we're talking British politics. Of course, everything is being blamed on Labour in the UK at the moment. Now, we move on. Cape Town schools are being hit by vandals continuously, it seems. In the latest incident, Eurocon Primary School was burgled and 2 classrooms were set alight, with damages amounting to well over 200,000 rand. Burglary and vandalism at schools is said to have reached epic proportions, with an average of 3 schools being targeted daily there. The MEC for Education in the Western Cape, Debbie Schaefer, held a media briefing last week to appeal to communities to help protect schools ahead of the upcoming June holidays. The department spent over 10 million rand in the last financial year to repair damaged school buildings. Now, the Western Cape MEC for Education, Debbie Schaefer, joins us live at our studios in Cape Town. Very good morning to you, and thank you very much for joining us.
Morning, Eben. Thank you for having me, and I'm glad it's not 3 o'clock in the morning here.
Yeah, that would have been very difficult, wouldn't it? Just quickly tell us about the problem that you're facing, and then heading into the holidays, what kind of scenarios are you guys putting in place?
Look, every holiday season we put additional security in place in our schools that are particularly hard hit. As you've quite rightly pointed out, though, many of our schools are being hit continuously, not even during the holidays, with an average of 3 per day last year. So it's a huge problem for us. And we always put in the holidays additional security for high-risk schools. We get extra patrolling, sometimes 12 hours, sometimes 24 hours, depending on the need. But we're really just saying now that whatever we put in place, we really need the communities to assist us as well, because we cannot do it on our own. It just doesn't work on its own.
With so many incidents happening throughout the province, where do you kind of put the finger on what's at the root of this problem?
I think predominantly it is usually gang and drug related from what we've seen. It seems to be those areas that are particularly hard hit. Sometimes it may be people taking things just to sell for survival, but I think usually it relates to gangs and drugs activity particularly.
What about security? Do you think going forward that better security at schools is something that you should look at?
Well, as I say, whatever security measures we seem to try, it obviously helps to some extent, but there are a lot of things that happen from day to day that we believe could be avoided if people were to assist us by reporting it immediately. For example, many of our schools have fences that are stolen piece by piece. Now, you can't tell me our whole school fence gets stolen and nobody in the community sees it. So, we are putting extra security in place, but it's not our primary function. Our primary function is education. So we are obviously taking responsibility as far as we can for safety within our schools. We're putting every possible measure in place that we can. We're also calling on the police to intensify their areas, because actually security is their primary function. But, as I say, we need everybody just to cooperate and assist us. It needs to be a whole community effort between us and people living in areas where they are particularly hard hit, as well as the police, as well as community safety, as well as our Metro Police. They are all involved at the moment, but we really need an intensified approach.
How do we inculcate this relationship, this private, or this partnership rather, that we need with our communities in order to overcome this increasing problem? I'm really wanting to encourage schools, communities where there are particular problems, to look at other areas similar to them who have done really good work. And we've got a number of schools where they have been very successful partnerships with communities. One of them is Athwood in Hanover Park, which is one of our particularly hard-hit gang areas. And there's another one in Philippi, which is a depressed community, where local people have got together of their own, on their own initiative and just said this is now enough. And they patrol the schools, they work with the police in the area, they help and give tip-offs and they give information. And I would like to encourage our schools to go and look at those kind of schools to see what has worked for them and to try and replicate that. And finally, June holidays around the corner. It always seems it peaks around this sort of time. What kind of scenarios are you guys putting in place?
Well, first of all, the schools that have got alarm systems, which is the vast majority of schools in the Western Cape, please make sure that they're working, make sure that principals test those alarm systems, make sure that they are alarmed before the people leave the school. And as I say, extra security will be put in place at the schools that we find particularly are at high risk. We will have additional patrols in place, both private and police. We will engage with the police too to also step up their patrolling around those schools.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. That's Debbie Schaefer, who's the Western Cape MEC for Education. We're talking about a problem that seems to be getting worse and worse in the Western Cape. That's vandalism of schools, school property, and even the fences. Why would they want to steal the school fences? Anyhow, today's picture of the day comes from one of our very own journalists. Horisani Sitoli captioned Dube Hostel. Now, what the picture you see remains one of the vandalized ATMs, says a local KFC and bottle store were also looted during the SABC, the Soweto riots, rather, hashtag SABC News, I can tell you. Yep, seems very clear. KFC, a bottle store, and an ATM. Kind of puts this protest into picture, doesn't it? Let's now take a look at the front pages from around the globe. We start in Europe. The Times there reports that David Cameron is to lift campaign spending limits for the EU referendum by 40% in a move that will deepen the fears of some Tory MPs that he's seeking to fix the result. In the USA Today reports world leaders are holding talks in Germany. Said yesterday they would push to maintain economic sanctions on Russia until a peace plan for the Ukraine is fully implemented. And finally, in New York, the Wall Street Journal there, well, Stan Wawrinka was the man. He defeated world number 1 Novak Djokovic in 4 sets for a maiden French Open title yesterday, leaving Djokovic still short of the career Grand Slam. Let's take a look now at what's happening around the country today. We start here in Johannesburg with the trial of suspended police crime intelligence head Richard Ndluli and his co-accused are expected to continue. They stand accused of being complicit in the murder of Opa Ramogibe, the husband of Ndluli's former girlfriend. Then in Thohoyandou, the trial of suspected University of Venda serial killer Ndivuo Ntsieni, who was arrested in connection with multiple murders, rapes, kidnappings, and attempted murders, will take place in the Magistrates Court there. Then in Bredasdorp on the south coast, a 28-year-old man is expected to appear in the regional court in the Overberg today in connection with the murder of the 14-year-old Alna Jafta. She had been strangled to death, and the body was found hidden under a bed. Anyhow, now the McKinley Police Department placed one of its officers on administrative leave as officials investigate after video of a police response to a disturbance call on Friday was posted online. It's caused quite a stir. The 7-minute-long video shows police officers throwing a teenage unarmed girl on the ground and continuously shoves her head down before taking out what appeared to be a gun, chasing away 2 black teenage boys. The video has once more highlighted the racial tensions that continue to simmer in the United States, with the authorities, especially the police, continuously in the picture. This video, of course, viral of the very latest incident. This is Newsroom. We'll be back with you shortly.
One of the things that I want people to do when they come to the exhibit is to see what an incredible work the Migration series is.
Fami's work has also been featured at London and New York Fashion Week and in collaborations with leading international designers. Tunisia is listed as one of the top 20 destinations for 2015 by the National Geographic Traveller.
There are lots and lots of children who are going to be learning Xhosa as a second language, and Oxford University Press is about supporting language.
Join Musam Khalipi on Afro Showbiz every Saturday at 19:30 CAT.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom. Now, the 25th African Union Summit has just started in Sandton and Pretoria here in South Africa and will last until the weekend, until Sunday, really. This will be the second time that South Africa hosts the African Union Summit after it hosted the 2002 African Union Inaugural Summit. All 54 member states are expected to attend, as well as foreign ambassadors to the AU. Now, Kenya will be a key focus. The country continues to face a spate of attacks perpetrated by a Somali militant group, Al-Shabaab, putting its promising economy at risk. The East African country has been described, well, to be 2015's third fastest growing global economy. Now, currently in South Africa, to share perspective on the current and emerging risks, we are joined today by Pan-African advisory firm Africa Practices COO Richard Kiplagat. Very good morning to you, Richard. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
The AU starts today. Are we let's cut to the chase. Are we hoping for lasting solutions or at least a plan to combat Al-Shabaab in Kenya?
Well, as you know, the issue of extremism is not a national issue, it's a global issue. It's an issue that is challenging economies across the globe, and to whose the solution has to be addressed through regional intervention. In Kenya, the insecurity is driven primarily as a consequence of the poor state of governance in Somalia, and therefore it's not restricted to what's happening in Kenya. And the support of regional partners through mechanisms such as the African Union and IGAD are going to be critical in addressing some of the most fundamental issues with regards to insecurity.
Security being one of those issues. Is that one of your expectations to come out of the AU summit this week? Security?
Well, I think one of the critical things about the summit is how do we deal with the root causes of insecurity? There has been already, as you know, a joint African Union force in Somalia that is trying to address the capacity gaps in terms of security in the country. However, how do we deal with the levels of inequality that are the seedbed of radicalization, that provide a fertile ground for organizations that are trying to radicalize youth? And that is one of the things that hopefully, as a continent, we can look at much more seriously and find concrete examples and solutions to addressing these kind of fundamental problems.
Let's talk about the situation with regards to security in Kenya itself. What's the latest with regards to Al-Shabaab there?
Well, there have been a number of fundamental interventions over the past 24 months. As you know, the government did change its head of police and the head of internal security, with an increased emphasis on strengthening the intelligence capabilities and capacity of the country to get early warning and in preparation for potential attacks. But besides that, there's also been work around technology and the implementation of over 1,800 CCTV cameras across Nairobi and eventually to all the other major towns in the country. And finally, there's been an effort to also look at putting together a conference in the next few weeks around, again, radicalization, anti-radicalization efforts. And how does one work with religious-based and faith-based organizations? How does one work with education institutions, community and civil society organizations to really deal with the narrative that radicalization is currently pushing?
What is it, third fastest growing economy globally? What is it that Kenya is doing right? And then tell us the legitimate threat of this type of insurgency on the economy, on the future outlook, on growth.
Well, as you know, the key to growth is primarily got to do with creating an enabling environment. And that, for Kenya, started through the implementation, the design and implementation of our Vision 2030, which was really a fundamental change for Kenya, away from prescriptive visions for the country that came from discussions with multilaterals to a homegrown vision of where Kenya wants to go and must go. This was underpinned by a new constitution that created a lot of checks and balances and a devolved structure, a very stable governance structure. And I think today Kenya is in a place where investors feel that there are stronger institutions, that the checks and balances are in place, and that they feel that their investments are safe not only in the short run, but in the long run. And I think it's the combination of those two things that have, I think, driven a lot of the positive sentiment around Kenya.
Quickly tell us about South Africa's relationships, South Africa's relationship with Kenya. Where would we want to see it in the next decade?
Well, as you know, South Africa is a powerhouse on the continent. Kenya needs South Africa, and we do believe that also South Africa can benefit very much from a positive relationship with Kenya. You may be aware that if you look at the growth rate of South Africa, you're somewhere slightly below 2%.
Yeah.
If you look at Kenya, 5.4%, heading to 7% in 2017. If you look at what is happening in East Africa, driven by a number of initiatives of the heads of state of the East Africa region, the combined market size is 150 million people, growing at quite a significant pace. So there's a strong opportunity for markets for South African and Southern African countries. Now, I think that there is room for collaboration. I'm delighted to hear about the progress around the tripartite and the creation of a unified trading area. But that, I think, more needs to be done, and also the announcement of a joint committee between the government of South Africa and the government of Kenya a couple of weeks ago, I think will drive improved collaboration between the two countries.
Well, I thank you for joining us today. That is Pan-Africa or Africa Practices CEO Richard Kiplagat, who's in South Africa to talk money and relationship. I thank you for joining us here this morning, giving us your unique views. Now, we move on to ATMs were vandalized and roads were barricaded by rocks in Soweto as residents went on the rampage over Eskom power cuts in the area there last night. Yeah, some of your views on it, of course, at SABC Newsroom. Sibatle says, Dube protest. JMPD says that Dube hostel dwellers went on a rampage yesterday and threatened to burn down a KFC outlet. Earlier reports say that KFC outlet was now looted. Horitsani Sitole says, Sibasa, there was also unrest in Meadowlands Zone 8. We managed to contain the situation and arrests were made. Talking there directly to us here at SABC News. Ray says a multiple gunfire as the Dube Hospital residents in Soweto are marching to the councillor's house demanding answers for their blackouts. I don't know how the councillor is going to sort out the scenario around the blackout. Must be tough being a councillor these days. Anyhow, here's our tweet of the day. It comes from Jay Beware on the McKinney incident, where a police officer was seen manhandling a black unarmed teenager. He says, to those kids in McKinney, there's no excuse why we haven't fixed this in this country yet. Nobody deserves to be treated that way. Yes, nobody deserves to be physically accosted when you're just sitting on the side of the road. Anyhow, let's take a look at what's on our News and Facebook page this morning. It's Monday morning. The National Police Commissioner, Ria Piecha, says more than 2,000 police detectives and social workers have been trained to deal specifically with child abuse. Then the trend by some African leaders to alter constitutions to prolong their stay in power will come under discussion during the African Union's Heads of State and Government Summit, which will take place in Johannesburg this week. Then US President Barack Obama said that G7 leaders meeting in the Bavarian Alps yesterday discussed standing up to Russian aggression in the Ukraine amid an upsurge in violence there. That monitors are blamed on Moscow-backed separatists. Now, for more news, you can get all the updates on our Facebook page or, at SABC Newsroom. That's where you can get it. Or you can simply go to our website, sabc.co.za/news. All the latest updates appear right there. Time for us to take another break. When we come back, we'll talk about the emotive issue that is name change, street name change, here in South Africa. You're watching Newsroom.
Morning is when different people take different directions to different places for different reasons to do different things. Streets come alive. Evening is when people go home to their loved ones and turn to South Africa's most watched and trusted evening news. Because we keep the nation fully informed. We are SABC News.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. Police have confirmed that calm has been restored in Soweto, south of Johannesburg. Last night, chaos erupted when Dube hostel dwellers went on the rampage and looted a local restaurant and bottled store. Residents were angry over Eskom's disconnection of power to their area. This is something the utility is blaming on illegal connections. Lawyers for the Marikana miners will seek the immediate release of the report on the August 2012 violence today. The urgent application in the High Court in Pretoria comes after they wrote to President Jacob Zuma 2 weeks ago, warning him to release the report within 2 days. The president has said the report will be released before the end of this month. And the trend by some African leaders to prolong their stay in power is one of the topics that will come under discussion during the AU summit. This as South Africa prepares to host African leaders for the African Union's Heads of State and Government Summit in Sandton today. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, back to you.
Thank you very much once again, Nina. The fight over the removal of old apartheid and other statues has yet not faded away. Now the city of Tshwane and AfriForum are clashing over the change of street names. The High Court in Pretoria has ordered the Metro to restore the use of both new and old names until a ruling is made by the Supreme Court of Appeal next year. The Metro had removed old street names, but civil rights group AfriForum took them to court and won. If the city adhered to the order by Judge Eben Jordan, both the old and the new street names would appear on street signs by August this year. But the city is adamant it would not budge on the issue. It's the second time that the street name saga has gone to court, or to the appeals court. Both the city of Tshwane and AfriForum are joining us today to talk about the matter. Now, joining us here in studio is representing civil rights group AfriForum is Werner Himan. And then from Pretoria, live in our Pretoria studio, is a member of the Male Committee for Economic Development and Planning, Councillor Subesh Pillay. Very good morning to you, Councillor Pillay.
Good morning, Evan.
If I can start with you, Councillor Pillay. It's been toing and froing and in and out of the courts. Just give us your opening remarks on the entire issue.
Well, I think even when we started the name change process, we were clear that this process has to build an inclusive city. And if you look at the permutation of the final 25 names, we've gone to great length to ensure that the completeness of the history of our city is reflected in those 25 names, including the 2 names being Pretoria Street and Paul Kruger Street, which were retained when we did the street name changes. So we just believe that the toing and froing in courts is simply a smokescreen that seeks to prevent the transformation of our city. We will continue to challenge that matter in the courts, but we remain resilient in our conviction that this capital city has to represent the people of our country and the completeness of its history.
Mr. Himan, if I can get your response to that.
Yes, sir. What the MMC, the issue of the court application is separate from the issue that MMC is raising. The issue of the court application, firstly, we need to draw a distinction that there are 2 applications here. The first one is review action, and this focuses on procedure. According to our client, there's been numerous procedures not followed, which includes the Municipal Finance Management Act, the National Geographic Guidelines, and also the public participation process. When we lodged the application, we requested from the city to provide us with an undertaking not to remove the old street names so that they can be properly adjudicated upon. They did not adhere to the request, and in fact, they expedited the process, which necessitated an urgent application. So that what happened 2 weeks ago is actually interim relief granted to our client 2 years ago. So the issue of inclusive names is not actually the same when we're talking about due procedure that must be followed. AfriForum's position on name change is quite simple. Names have meaning to different people in society, and we need to build an inclusive society. But we need to have the due process followed in this regard.
In South Africa, if I pick up the newspapers and I go online, I am told constantly that we are a nation divided and at peril, at war with each other. How do we find each other, Mr. Himan? How do we build this inclusive, multicultural, multiracial society where we can be at peace with ourselves? How do we do that?
I believe a step in the right direction would be if interest groups like us, AfriForum, the executive as the city, sit around a table and negotiate. We don't want to go to court. We don't want to fight over this in courts. That's why when we requested the undertaking, we requested from the city, let's have a negotiated settlement, let's sit around the table and talk about these issues. No doubt there will be some names we will agree to have been removed. But there are some names which we want to remain. And we can repeat this after this morning here. We will go for a negotiated settlement, to sit around the table and discuss issues. I think that's the way forward. The parties to sit and discuss a mutually beneficial situation.
Councillor Pillay, now you've been handed 60 days to restore old and new names. What are you going to do, especially in light of what you're hearing now from the protagonists within the discussion? What are you going to do?
Well, let me just make the point that your guest there says this thing must come about as a result of a negotiated settlement. I think let's put it on record that the executive mayor led an intense round of negotiations, amongst others with AfriForum, which is what resulted in the retention of two of the names being, as I said, Paul Kruger and Pretoria Street. So it's in fact not true that this has happened without any consultation. As I say, we've been engaging a whole range of stakeholders, particularly AfriForum in that instance. Now, on the matter of the court, the city reserved its rights. We're currently consulting our legal team. We appear poised at this stage, based on the preliminary advice, to take the decision of the Gauteng North High Court on review to the appeals court in Bloemfontein.
Again, it seems like the city at that time was pushing to have the names removed quite expeditiously. The discussions with AfriForum was not done, and I can say with confidence that even in the judgments, the first judgment, the urgent application, as well as the one for the appeal, stated that there still had been discussions when the city went forth and just very expeditiously removed the names.
What do you say to that, Councillor Pillay?
Well, even again, we had, apart from the consultation with stakeholders and so on, we followed a formal process as provided for in terms of the policy that regulates street names in the city. That decision culminated in a full resolution or full sitting of council supporting the resolution to proceed with the street name changes. We had included in that recommendation to council, which, as I say, was finally resolved, that the dual names would appear for a period of time. And in our considered opinion, 6 months would have been a reasonable period. Now, remember, the dual names was not part of, it was simply to ensure that the transition happens in a smooth way and that people who move about in the city don't get confused by the new and old names. So it could not have been conceivably that it remains perpetually the dual names. And that's why we believe that a period of 6 months was sufficient to allow the transition to happen. The entire mapping system had been changed. People had become used to the new street names, and life has gone on in the city. I mean, there were screaming headlines about 1.something billion rands, the cost of all of this, and none of that has actually materialized. In fact, South Africans have accepted these names, and people have gone about their daily lives almost business as usual, and the street names have become a part of life in the city of Tshwane. And we quite frankly don't understand the posture of AfriForum to continue to want to draw the Afrikaner community into a lager and almost isolate the Afrikaner community. That's not the intention. The Afrikaner community have a place in our city as they do in our country, and we want to relate that history in the completeness of how our public signals, our street name, our public art gets reflected and espoused in the city.
pulling the Afrikaner nation into a lager in a country where it seems we are constantly angry and at war with ourselves?
That's simply not the case. What the MMC missed there in the entire outset of what had transpired, there already had been a review action lodged. It's just proper practice when a review action is lost that the status quo remained for the proper adjudication. Even the judges said in the judgment that there are certain court procedures there that need to be followed, and they denied it.
How do we give this a human face? How do we find humanity? How do we find each other? How do you want to find the city?
I would again suggest that the negotiations, or at least discussions, be open upon this. We do not think that the process has been completely followed. We do not believe that the consultations can be completely done. So there's still room for that. And again, the city want to persist to go litigate again.
Your response to that, and then tell us about costs and costs incurred, Councillor, and then who will pick up the legal costs eventually?
So let's just reflect on the legal process. Remember that the initial application was an urgent motion brought about by AfriForum to interdict the city from proceeding with the street name changes. The urgent motion was denied, and the matter was set down on the ordinary court rolls, which is what is now what is now going to happen or be heard by the courts. Parallel to that, let me make the point: the court made no determination as to the dual names when that urgent motion was declined. And then the city proceeded in terms of its own decision. Now remember that the council is a legislative body, and its decisions carries the full weight of a legislative body. So when the council resolves, it can't be by way of administrative action that somebody in the city decides that we are going to negate or not execute a council decision. And consistent with that decision, the administration proceeded after a period of 6 months to change the street names. At that point, AfriForum went back, now simply to seek an interdictory order to prevent the city from removing the dual names, which is what 2 years later the courts have now pronounced on. So that is where we are. As I say, in terms of the cost, we had said it before the name changes, we had said it during the process, and I think the period of the past 2 years has vindicated us that there is no 1-odd billion rands that the screaming headlines were reflecting, that in fact the cost, yes, there was a cost, something at the time we estimated in order of about 2.5 million rands, but for the rest of it, it was the operational cost that would have otherwise gone into replacing street names over a period of time, and incrementally we've gone through that process. So, as I say, if you look at business in the city, they've come to terms, they've changed their letterheads, their business cards, the GIS mapping systems have all changed, the street names are now recorded on the mapping systems, and all of that life has simply gone on. AfriForum remains convinced in their conviction that the Afrikaner community has to be drawn back and treated differently.
Councillor, thank you for joining us today. I gave you the first word today. I'm going to give AfriForum the last word. You've got about 45 seconds to wrap up your response.
Well, AfriForum believes in positive negotiation and discussions between various parties. We do believe that there's some all street names we do have a place in the new dispensation. And the following statement I say with the utmost sensitivity, but not all names that predate 1994 need to have a struggle connection to be legitimate names in South Africa. There are names, for example, Queen Wilhelmina, who is the Queen of England, who criticized the British during the Boer War and were against British imperialism. She, we believe, has a loud place in the city.
Well, I thank you for joining us. All I can say is that I hope we find each other. In South Africa, we need to find each other. You know, it looks at times as if we can be so far divided over the smallest of little issues. It's a very delicate time in our country right now. Let's all try and make a contribution to our nation. I thank you once again for joining us, and also to the good councillor joining us live from the capital there this morning. Now, over the weekend, David Spoonsy emerged as the new NUM General Secretary after defeating Frans Baleni in what seems to be a very tight race. Now, former Congress of South African Trade Union Secretary General Zwelinzima Vavi has welcomed the change, saying the new leadership in the NUM is exactly what the Trade Union Federation needs to restore hope amongst workers. Here are some of your views after the election that took place. Sipho Sitoli says, mine, see, Frans Baleni has lost his position as leader of MUM. It's wake-up calls. We approach local elections. Someone must lose again, says Sipho Sitole. Song says, proudly, Ramaphosa was at MU in Congress to give the mandate to David Punza for him to support ANC in next year's elections, the founder of NUM stated. Bas Uncle Gwere says, it will never happen. Mkele, the NUM elections didn't work because they didn't hire IEC South Africa to run it like I said, says Bas Uncle Gwere. Yes, everyone can be funny, isn't it? Mzwanele Mnyamanyi says, Progressive Professionals Forum congratulate NUM Media for peaceful elections and pledge our support to the new leadership. Thank you to the outgoing leaders as well. Yes, that's how we should be doing our business, man. Pasco says, rooting, he suppose he says, for routing of Frans Baleni at NUM is one of the reasons Kasatu Stumut Lamini does not want elections. He knows he'll be sent packing too. I'm not sure if it was a rout. There was only 12 votes in that, so it was a very close-run thing at the weekend. Well, that's where we wrap it. I'm going to get up and say goodbye. Newsroom is broadcast live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. The show then repeats. Well, it doesn't repeat anymore. I'm talking twuck, actually. We are live on YouTube at that time, and you can watch us back on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. Remember, we love it in the morning.